Da, 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 da,
Is this the
da,
intro music?
da, 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 Sha-da-dum, sha-da-dum, ba-da. It's challenges for the composer. Challenges for the composer. Where we discuss all the different challenges that composers have. Hi,
You
my
even-
name is Cassidi Jackson. These are my two co-hosts.
Okay.
I'm Gavin.
Co-hosts introduce
Gavin Gourley.
I'm David. Do I give my last names too?
Yes.
David Rambo Serrano, and no, I'm not homophobic. Don't look at the
Hello.
profile picture.
Oh, wow.
Hello. Welcome to our lovely podcast episode called Challenges for the Composer, where today me, Gavin, and David are going to dissect, examine, talk about, and discuss some of the challenges that composers have faced, be it from society or from their own personal mental health, or just life challenges.
You're making
Yeah,
me sound
was that a
real
good
smart
intro?
there.
Was that
was
good?
great.
No, yeah.
It's gonna
that
have
works.
to be.
You're
Cool,
making
I
us.
love that.
You made us sound really smart.
Yeah, this is not going to be a smart episode. We're hoping this is enough to just pass the project. But
I know.
it's a great way to start. So David,
Yeah.
tell us what
Misogyny.
information you've brought to the table today.
Well, as Gavin just spoiled, thanks, Gavin.
Oh dear.
I know, right? It's about misogyny, because who better to speak on this than somebody who looks male?
Right.
Okay, so what do you guys know about Fanny Mendelssohn? Her story? What do you know?
She was definitely overlooked by her brother, Felix Mendelssohn.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Mhm.
say. Not enough. Don't
Yeah.
know enough.
She don't know enough. Okay. Well, allow me to elucidate the situation. That's probably not the right word.
Probably
I don't know
not.
why I'm trying this. So, right. So I'm pulling information from a fancy article called The Suppression of Fanny Mendelssohn, Suppressions in Quotes, Rethinking Feminist Biography by Mary Ann Wilson Kimber. Just Kimber.
Okay.
Yes. So, this article is basically just about Fanny Mendelssohn, kind of her life and just looking at and redefining how she was viewed in the music community with like actual research instead of just assuming that, like, obviously she was a woman, she did face some troubles because of that. She definitely didn't receive as much recognition for her works that she should have. So I wanted to touch upon her relationship with her brother, but also how she was viewed in the music community. And her relationship with her brother, he actually seemed to support her work, because she would write letters to him about it. But in those letters, it seemed like she was really fighting for people to listen to her music. Um, One of the letters, she said she shoved them down, them referring to her music, Schlesinger's throat. I don't know who Schlesinger is, but he must be important if she's shoving her music down his throat.
That's a very good way to get your music out there and known, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's great because Fanny also had a support system, whereas a lot of burgeoning female composers might not have. She at least had her husband, Wilhelm Hensel, sorry. He was actually a huge supporter of her career as a composer. He would encourage her to like get her music out there. He would even provide her words to set her music to. So he was like, yeah, huge supporter.
That's actually super interesting because I don't know. I mean, how many female composers actually have the support of their husbands or of, other friends or family?
Right. Especially because back then, being a female composer kind of devalues your status in society.
Mhm.
Right.
Like, higher women shouldn't be composing because they're supposed to lead a domestic life, not a life of, actually doing something they're good at and enjoying it.
Which results in situations where, like, a father of this musically talented family will look at their daughter's music and be like, put your brother's name on it and it'll sell.
Right. But
But
see, Felix, he wouldn't just try to pass them off as his own, actually. If I can find it. He actually admitted to like people that, hey, yeah, Fanny composed this. And also it was really obvious to the public apparently that some of the pieces were Fanny's. So they weren't really fooled by it.
Yeah, because she's going to have her own style.
Right.
Yeah, they were actively ignoring her music.
Right.
Sad.
I can see you judging them
there
from
was
here.
I am.
Yeah, but in cultivated music circles, at least, she was well known, and like people did appreciate her music as Fanny, Fanny's music, not Felix's, but that was in the small groups of people who didn't care about that stuff.
A little cult following.
Yeah, cult following, pretty much. I need to find this because it was good information.
Do we want to call it a cult following?
Well, yeah, it's not necessarily a cult following if it's a cultivated musical circle.
Is that what cult stands
Cultivated.
for? Oh.
Well, just because it has the word cult in it doesn't mean...
I mean...
Cult isn't, that isn't a unanimously bad term. Like when someone talks about a cult classic or something, it's a work of art or a product that's like known by this tiny group of people.
True.
So that's like a cult following.
But
fine, I concede.
Oh.
We're not talking religious cults here.
Yeah, okay. Fanny Hensel's music. Yeah, so while her music didn't receive a lot of, performances on the level of, say, Brahms or Schumann, probably, or Schubert even, while they weren't that well known, they were known in music circles, people who actively, as I said, look for that kind of music.
Hey, come put something together for my dance party, kind of a thing.
Right. And people did recognize her talent. So, fun thing, Dvorak was quoted in 1892 in the Boston Post saying, quote, "Women have no creative power," end quote. I know, right?
That makes me so sad because we read that one source where Dvorak was talking about, American music and how we do have our own style of music that's specifically American, and I was like, wow, that's so brilliant. But then he goes around saying stuff like that, and I'm like, Dvorak, you can't. It's so difficult to. I don't know. Every person is just very not two-faced, but there's always a stopping point to. Gosh, what am I looking for? There's always a stopping point for people when it comes to inclusion.
Yeah. But someone did respond to him, someone named George Chadwick, who I assume is important because they wouldn't name him otherwise. He responded that, hey, in the case of Mendelssohn's sister, i.e. Fanny, she wrote, music as good as Mendelssohn did. Like, shut up, Dvorak, pretty much.
I agree, George.
Yeah. We all agree with George, the true
George
Chad.
was also an American composer.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Yes.
But seriously, to be so presumptuous as to just immediately rule out the creative potential of half of the entire human race, like, way to go, dude.
Right.
Ben. Well, I am the only female here, so,
Gavin's the only man here.
Yeah.
There you go.
All this of spectrum.
Oh my gosh. Wait,
The awkward energy.
I know.
it's so awkward. We're figuring it out though.
Makes
We
it
are.
topical,
We're
though. Makes it topical.
We're making it.
So, misogyny existed in the Romantic period. We get it. Does it still exist today? Duh. Yes, of course it does. So I found another article, thanks to Galileo. Thanks, Galileo, and the university system for letting us use this research thing. Um, that was not
You're
my
gonna get
music.
copyright striked.
No.
I mean, if we're posting this somewhere, we are.
Continue, David.
Okay, yes. So, yes, misogyny does exist today. The article I found was called Women in Improvisation by Pamela. Uh, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Rieter Feenstra. Yep, that's it.
That was a good attempt.
It was good enough. And it basically looks at women in jazz and how they've been treated. And, well, not well. She specifically looks at someone named Ellen Rowe, who was one of the only women jazz students at the Eastman School of Music in 1980. And it's basically like an account of her experience, of Ellen Rowe's experience, and how she deals with that with her students now. When she was a student at the Eastman School of Music, yes, we're name dropping, hold them accountable. Ellen Rowe said, like, they told me, my playing sounded too feminine.
Wow.
Which is fun. Yeah, I know. And that was in 1980.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, seriously, how often do you see a female improvisational soloist in a jazz band?
Literally never.
I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Like, even especially at Schwobe, I have not seen it.
Yeah.
I think I've only seen one person like participate with the Schwobe Jazz at the Loft. It was a singer. I think it was Lacara. Was it?
Victoria.
Mhm.
It was Victoria. Thank you. Yeah, but she's the only one I've seen. So there's just a lot of like objectification, misogyny, and abuse, pretty much, among this program, this jazz program with women. And it's very much dictated what they can wear, what's appropriate for them, and how they play. Let's see. I don't know if this I is referring to Ellen herself or Pamela who wrote this article. But
In quotes.
yeah. A guest jazz trumpeter asked this person, who was a female jazz performer, what her ethnicity was. She responded Filipino, and he said, "Oh, that explains a lot," and pretty much humiliated her in front of the class.
Wow.
That is. It's
Yeah.
so. It's interesting. At one of the Black Schwab Society panels,
Mhm.
they had Dr. K. Pace come in, and she was talking about her experiences as a Black music educator. And I thought it was so interesting because she
Mhm.
said that as Black people, and I think this is true for women as well, and anyone who's discriminated against, it's not a matter of like jumping hurdles to just try and win a race and taking breaks in between. Or, it's not a matter of running a marathon where we can just sit down and like rest. But it's a matter of constantly running and constantly facing the challenges. And we have no choice
Yeah.
to overcome these challenges that they face in their life.
Mhm.
And so it's just so sad to hear that is something they face on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and they have no choice but to put themselves in that place unless
Right.
they don't want to achieve their dreams, if they don't want success.
Right. Who said this again?
Dr. Kay Pace. She's a retired educator.
Yes, that was the I know exactly what you're talking about. I watched that convo event
Mm-hmm.
where they have to be raised to be the best, because if you're not
Yes.
the best, then you're just constantly going to be torn down and questioned. I mean, even if you are the best, people are going to question you.
Mm-hmm.
But and continually like raising the goalpost.
Yes.
Everyone's going to look for some means of
Mhm.
challenging you or putting you to the test.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In fact, I think
it
it
also
gets even harder the more successful you become.
right.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of last semester, another convo event, I believe, where Dr. Marini was talking about her experience being a female conductor and being like a student, where she was
Yeah.
like how she dressed. She couldn't wear, I think, was it she couldn't wear high heels or something, like just dictating her dress
Yeah.
constantly, and like cut your hair short, which
Mm-hmm.
she thankfully didn't do.
Yeah. There's
Just
always that standard that people think you have to follow
mhm,
in order for a woman to be even recognized for their accomplishments.
right.
Yeah, because there was that story she told us about how her conducting instructor got really mad because someone commenting on her work didn't even use her name,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm,
he got upset about it because it's like she deserves to be recognized.
Of course.
right.
She has a name.
And even if people use her name, they don't know how to pronounce it.
Yep.
It's really sad.
Or wait, that might have been what it was. I think that's what it was. It was a mispronunciation. He was like, "Excuse me."
Yeah,
Bianchi, if you ever listen to this, we've got you.
we got your back
We
forever.
Yeah.
support you and we will change all of the people who say your name wrong.
If she did get this, my question is to her: how? Thank you.
I'll
So
even
now
admit
I
guilt.
want
I've
to.
spelled it wrong in an email once.
That's sad.
She called me out on it, but she was super kind and turned it into a joke.
Did you deserve that?
Yes. I deserve to be called
Hey.
out.
Oh, I was asking if you deserved the kindness of being called out. The kindness you didn't. Anyway,
Oh, I would have left that up to
I
her,
want
but
to ask a question again.
Oh, question time.
all right.
Yes. How many of you know Mozart?
I do know Mozart, and I know he has a sister.
Which one
Oh,
is he
well,
again? He's the one that did like the trick with his hands over his
Gavin,
head.
yes or no?
I know Mozart. Yes.
Okay. How many, and I know this is a small sample size, but how many of you know Florence Price?
I
Yes.
do, but I wouldn't if I didn't go here.
Okay,
To
see,
Schwab.
and that's the thing. So obviously we're taught, these composers, thankfully by our music educators, um, people like Whistler, shout out.
Thank you for educating us, Dr. Wisner.
But the thing is, like Gavin, what you said, you wouldn't know that if you weren't, a music student. And I think that says something, that so many people know about Mozart, but they don't know anything about Florence Price, who is, the first African American composer, like first African American woman to be recognized as a composer. And my question is, because I looked at their early life, especially, and compared it, and it just seems similar. Like Mozart's first piano performance, I believe, was at like age 4, and he did it for a court, right? And I looked at Florence. Her first piano performance was at age 4, and while she didn't do it in front of a court, same age, same age that music is happening. Um, At age 14, Florence had graduated as a valedictorian, and at age 14, let's see, Mozart did something.
He wrote some really generic music for choirs.
He was already at the School of Verona. So he was basically already, like, at this point, they're at the same education level, you know?
Mm-hmm. But you don't see anyone sticking Florence Price's compositions up to a pregnant woman's stomach, trying to educate them better on music.
Right.
Or make them more intelligent.
And it's like, considering that we have so few, I don't know, I just feel like we don't talk about American composers enough. Obviously, USA didn't exist until like 1700s, whatever.
We have a shorter history. A rich, but still shorter history.
Yeah, a little short in history. But at the same time, why aren't we more proud of that, you know? Why are we... Oh, well, I can answer that. Racism and misogyny, you know?
Oh, yes. A good and correct answer.
Thank you. Right. The logical but horrible conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just why aren't we magnifying that more instead of some stuffy, very misogynistic, I believe, alcoholic man who died at a young age, who did not take care of himself?
Oh, Mozart?
Is that your segue?
Yeah, he was he was
That
wild.
Can be my segue. Sure. Whatever.
What? He was wild.
He was wild. Who else was wild? People like, I don't know. Schumann, yeah.
One of our favorite.
Yeah, I want to. First of all, you gotta back off Schumann a little bit, all right? Don't go after my boy.
You like these new shoes?
Stop.
Come on.
All right, so I want to start getting into it by talking a little bit about some other societal pressures and focus that on both of the Schumanns, Robert and Clara. Yes?
Can you hold on? Sorry, I just really had to get that out. Continue, please.
What was it, a sneeze?
No, I just coughed like super
Oh. Yummy. We didn't hear it.
Why didn't you just
really?
mute yourself?
Yeah, it cut out.
I thought of that right after I did it, so it's okay. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Thank you. I wanted to begin with both Clara
Hold on,
and...
I have something to say. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
I wanted to get into how society treated situations like what happened with Clara and Robert Schumann. Because before Clara was a Schumann, she was a very young and very proficient piano prodigy. And an incredible composer already. She was instructed and supervised by her father, Friedrich Wieck. And he eventually ended up becoming Schumann's piano instructor, which that's anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Wieck.
Wieck,
because
yes, Friedrich Wieck.
Yes.
But also you spelled it wrong.
He was weak. I know I spelled it wrong on purpose because you said weak.
Could you not mess with me while I'm doing mine?
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Seriously.
That's why we put it in the chat.
Okay.
Bully him.
Okay, anyway, so I believe that this is how I was going to get into a little bit about their relationship and how it started to form, because Friedrich was focused on developing Clara's skills, but upon Schumann's arrival, he shifted a focus towards him, saying things like he could very well end up being one of the greatest pianists on the planet. You know, if if he really worked on it and honed his skills more. And this dynamic was a little strange, and it caused a lot of problems because, well, obviously we know that Clara and Robert fell in love, but after their proposal, after that, Robert goes to Friedrich and asks for her hand in marriage, and he says no. So we have this forbidden love situation going on, and I was pulling that from like the misogynistic element because she wasn't that young at the time, even. Like she was of an age where she could, take care of herself and potentially, do well in society. And to to stack more onto this, she was already a child musical prodigy. And her dad isn't letting her marry the guy that she wants to marry. So
wasn't she around 18 at the time this happened, or older?
They didn't get married until they were 20, or until she was 21, which was the age of majority. And in order for them to be married, once she reached the age of majority, they had to take her father to court and win, which is ridiculous. But so yeah, and
to love suing your father so you can marry someone.
Well,
that was the world. That was the world.
It's crazy.
I know. And then the guy wouldn't even let them exchange, like he wouldn't let them meet or exchange letters for this long period of time. And the only thing he let them ever exchange was their compositions. Because apparently he saw that as valid because it had, like, I don't know, academic merit or something. And so they ended up using that, and it's even reflected in their music. You see this tale of forbidden love play out in both of their earlier compositions, and it's really interesting. And I recommend listening to a lot of both of their music and their leader, because that's what's gotten me into it, is my experience with their leader. And there's some very beautiful songs with Clara writing these, in my opinion, unparalleled pieces of harmonic beauty, and Schumann Robert creating these pieces with these brilliant relationships between the keyboard and the voice. And it's all amazing stuff. And honestly, it's just my personal opinion, but in a lot of places I think that Clara does a lot more interesting things.
I agree. As I have
agree.
Some of Clara's songs.
Because it's just me, but I think, or it's just us, I guess, but I feel that she gets a lot more harmonically interesting than Robert does with a lot of her work. But this caused even more problems, because with this pressure of Schumann, apparently supposed to develop into one of the greatest pianists on the planet, he ends up pushing himself to improve his skills, and he like tries to do like a little bit of a cheat code of sorts. He builds this machine, or this little contraption that he wants to use to try and exercise some of his fingers individually while holding one of them in place. And the conventional story has it that this backfires, and he ends up injuring his hand and mostly paralyzing a few of his fingers. There's also speculation that it was a natural result of syphilis, which would also make sense.
Yikes. Not the syphilis.
That contraption sounds like something that you kind of like mysteriously buy on Amazon or Wish, and then you use it anyway because you spent money on it. Excuse me, but it doesn't. It paralyzes your hands instead of making them stronger.
Or it gave your hand syphilis. Either or.
Well, I don't know if that's how syphilis works. Anyway.
I'm looking here. I'm looking here at a New York Public Radio, and it was like I thought it was. He made it out of a cigar box. He made it out of a cigar box, which is interesting.
That's a DIY right there.
Troom
DIY gone wrong.
Yeah,
he made the first Troom video.
Oh, unfortunate.
But you get the gist. There was this almost this societal pressure surrounding Friedrich and needing his permission for them to actually live the lives that they wanted to live, and it wasn't okay. But yeah, the Schumanns had a handful of issues. Another thing that society wasn't exactly prepared to deal with or was even aware of its existence at the time was mental health issues, such as something like manic depressive bipolar disorder, which in retrospect, that diagnosis has actually been applied to Robert Schumann. Because when looking at this incredible amount of social anxiety he had as his life progressed with Clara, and I believe I gotta look for it, but I believe there were several occasions where Clara would end up having to appear sometimes as a public face, in his place, because he had this this crippling social anxiety. And there's more than that too, because when I looked at it and the reasons why people decided to place this diagnosis on him, I can actually see why, because I also have my own personal secondhand experiences with an individual diagnosed with this particular disorder. And most people understand what depression is like, this perpetual emotionally drained exhaustion with this this extreme low feeling of productivity, and most people are familiar with how that works.
Intimately, yes.
Oh dear. I mean, I think a lot of people might know someone who struggles with at least that, but I think less people are familiar with how a mania works. And it's largely the opposite. It is the opposite. It's effectively the opposite, but there's more to that than people think it is, because it's literally the opposite. The person goes through this burst of time that can go anywhere from a day to a few days to even several weeks, where they will have this perpetual burst of energy, this unending need to get things done, to accomplish something. It's like this hyper inspiration of sorts, and oftentimes they won't even sleep, because they're just in go mode 100% of the time, or in that period. And you get instances where these people start doing things where you wouldn't think they would normally even be capable of, things that they wouldn't even normally think themselves capable of. These, like the normal mental limiters, whether they be a result of anxiety or just natural limiters in our heads that are designed to, protect us from doing crazy things, those all come down, and they can do impressive, amazing, and dangerous things. And so that's what I mean when I say the opposite of a depressive state. It is incredibly high functioning and potentially dangerously high functioning.
Which is probably where Schumann had his most productive time composing, right?
Yeah, and it's there. There's hints of it reflected in the frequency of his compositions, because you'd have these chunks that stick out where he wrote a lot, he composed a lot in this smaller chunk of time, where I imagine him, like, at his house, just not sleeping, just composing. But it's juxtaposed against these long periods where he did not really produce anything, or very, very little. So I can see why they, drew to that conclusion with it. And it is also a common cause of social anxiety, because the person that I have this experience with, you have both met this person. I'm not going to say who they are just for the sake of privacy.
Dox them.
No, but well, like at least Cassidi, I think Cassidi, you'd be able to tell that this individual, when they're in social circumstances and they feel that they have to, give at least some kind of a decent presentation, that they become extremely nervous.
Yeah, and I wonder if, going back to when you're saying, like, Schumann having nights of just it's being totally on the go and composing all night. This is sort of a tangent, but I wonder if that's where the image of composers being at their desk and feverishly working comes from. Because not only Schumann has gone through this, but so many other composers have, which I will get into, have some sort of mental health problems that either relate to bipolar disorder or depression or anxiety. And so they have these bursts of energy where all they have or all they can do is compose, and they're always on the go day and night. And so we kind of get these stereotypical images in our minds of composers who are at their desk all the time composing. Everything they write must be some sort of genius that the world accepts. Specifically with old white guys, I think. But yeah, that's I wonder if that is where that came from.
Yeah, and it's interesting because his last songs, Schumann's, that is, they weren't received as, with the same ridiculous popularity that a lot of them have now in the world of Lieder. People didn't like those as much, but they seemed to be the ones where he was being a lot more, I don't want to say mundane at all, but honest in it. It wasn't his usual formula, and so people are kind of okay.
Yeah,
because one of the staples that that he's known so well for is similar to what Schubert is known so well for, is his incredible relationships he designs between instrumental accompaniment and the voice, creating this conversational composition where the vocal line begins the melodic contour and almost asks a question, and then the piano responds, personifying either an object that's in the scene that the music is depicting or another character that isn't sung in the language of the piece. It's really interesting, and that formula is a little bit different when you look at his last songs.
Yeah, especially closer to his death, as I believe that's when his physical and mental state got so much worse. And he even attempted to commit suicide somewhere around there too.
Yeah. Well, I think. Yeah. Let me look.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you for blessing my fritone.
Yeah, no problem.
Bobbert Schumann.
No, not Bobbert Schumann.
Yeah, the Geister Veritonen.
Twice removed cousin.
Those are the ones that I'm talking about. These pieces that he wrote as he was approaching death.
Mm-hmm.
They were.
That's what I imagined.
Yeah. Which is interesting because you even see something like that even with someone as pompous as Mozart. Even he went down to earth when he wrote his Requiem.
Oh yeah. And many of these other composers which, if you don't mind me stealing the show,
Not at all.
many of these other composers had very similar experiences, which is why I kind of wanted to briefly go through some very well-known composers, excuse me, and the struggles that they face throughout their lives, because I think we have this image of composers, again, just being at their desk, composing all day, not really having a life outside of that, and just living their life in a fancy, nice way with their white wigs and, and high society, something or something or other like that. But a lot of these composers, like Gavin just talked about with Schumann, had a really, really challenging lives. First, I'd love to talk about is George Friedrich Handel, whom we just sang a concert of. The Schwab Singers sang parts of Messiah, which I think is probably Handel's most well-known work, especially in the choral world.
Yes.
Handel was actually a very well-known alcoholic and gluttonist, which I think is very interesting. He would often deal with his problems and different mood shifts by consuming alcohol. And Handel also had, or looking back, and sort of retrospectively diagnosing Handel, he had cyclothymia, which is a lot like bipolar disorder, which Gavin described, except it's a lot less extreme. So there are mood shifts and emotional shifts and bursts of energy, but it seems, quote unquote, more controlled than someone with bipolar disorder. So Handel was an alcoholic. He ate a lot. Many people will talk about him eating a lot. And he was very, very depressed. Obviously, he would drown himself in alcohol every now and then. And eventually, throughout his life, he was a creative genius, and he composed a lot of works. But as he got older, he started to become blind. He was having more health issues. Any sort of eye surgery that he had to fix his eyes failed. And so the more older he got, the worse his eyesight became. He was unable to compose as quickly. He was unable to perform like he used to, of course. And when your whole life is music, obviously that's going to put you in a depressed place. And I think it's very, very sad as well, because Handel, he was always mentally sharp. He had a creative mind, and that did not deteriorate as he became older. He was always throughout his entire life so creative, but he could not put down that creativity anymore through his compositions or through his playing, because he just couldn't. He could not physically do that. So poor Handel was depressed most of his life, which is very interesting, I think, in the Baroque era, where everything seems very bright, or solemn, I suppose, in some senses. So,
and they didn't have anything to treat things like that. Like even in
exactly,
both in
there
the
were
Baroque
leeches.
era. Oh, jeez.
I think Handel would prefer alcohol to a leech.
You never know.
I think that's a largely unanimous. But
yeah,
I would not want leeches.
Yeah, what's interesting actually is when he had his eye surgery, it was by a very well-known doctor at the time who also performed eye surgery on Bach. And with Bach, it actually succeeded, and Bach was able to get his eyesight back. But with Handel, it failed. And so it's so sad to think that one of Handel's, counterparts and probably a close composer friend, was not able to see that same recovery and success that Bach was. Even though Handel did live longer, which is surprising. That's obviously cause for a deep depression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could imagine.
Yeah. Another composer that we might not be as familiar with, because we are all choral vocal people, is Anton Bruckner. which Bruckner did. He's an Austrian composer. He's an organist and a teacher. He did write many symphonies. He also wrote a lot of sacred and secular vocal and choral works. So, again, another well-known composer, just not as often in our Baroque oriented choir. So Bruckner he suffered from deep melancholy and sensitivity, which was a big characteristic in his family. He had a few other sisters, and he also had a mentally disabled younger brother as well. But Anton Bruckner grew up in St. Florian's Augustinian monastery, so he was a church boy. He was raised by monks, and that is also where he learned music. Bruckner is quoted to have said, "I am always sitting, being poor, lost, and melancholic," which is so sad for a child so young to always be plagued by melancholy and to be as sensitive as he was. He would often be seen crying just randomly in different places. Yeah. And actually, it got so bad, and he was so lonely to a point where the St. Florian Monastery was where he taught. So he was a student there, he grew up there, but then also he came back to teach music there. They assigned a monk to stay with him at all times so that he could have company and to keep him from committing suicide.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so intense and so deep. And in his 40s and onwards, he suddenly had the desire to do hard labor, like counting leaves, counting trees, counting stars, and counting dots on houses and graveyards, and gravestones. Excuse me. So there was no written way of dissecting or diagnosing exactly what was happening with Bruckner's mind, but it was obvious, like, that as he was getting older, he was detaching a little bit more from reality too.
Right.
A fun fact about Bruckner: he had a thing for teenage girls. He never became married at all because he was constantly trying to pursue teenage girls. To which he said teenage girls were most likely to be virgins compared to older women. Some thinking that is more sacred, and he was a church man, a man of faith, as we know. So, interesting fun fact. That might be connected to some other things. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
The more
Ultimately, the more you know, and maybe didn't want to know. Closer to Bruckner's death, he became obsessed with the idea of death. Like, if true crime shows existed in his day, he would be watching them day and night. Criminal Minds, X-Files, Law and Order, Who Let the Dogs Out? Hoo-hoo! That's not.
I haven't
That's not
watched
a show.
enough television.
No, it wasn't. You're right.
No, but he read about crimes, murder cases. He tried to touch the bodies of dead composers like Beethoven and Schubert, and he even saw ghosts. He became so obsessed with death that he tried to touch the bones, the bodies of the old great dead composers.
Interesting.
So Bruckner, I would love to know, or have a psychiatrist kind of dissect what might have been happening to Bruckner.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? That's quite the bomb to drop,
Crazy.
Very crazy. Now, this isn't to say that any of these composers did not have good times in their lives.
Right.
Obviously, they had some really great compositions, and they enjoyed making the music and performing the music. But we'll talk more. I'd love to talk more about how this might have played into their music.
Mm.
But I would like to now go to George Gershwin, who is a bit more of a
My
recent,
man.
recent composer. George Gershwin, American-born, Russian parents. Sorry, I'm just going to start that sentence over. George Gershwin, who was American-born, the son of Russian immigrants, and younger brother to Ira Gershwin, who many people know for his Rhapsody in Blue, Porgy and Bess, and American in Paris, all of these lovely, lovely things.
Yeah, even some of those have their own special stories.
He was a wild, wild dude. He was a wild, wild kid, you guys. A lot of what I'm about to say comes from a lot of what I'm about to say comes from a psychiatrist and musician named Richard Cogan, who has done a lot of research looking into George Gershwin's life and how musicians sort of deal with these mental health issues. So Gershwin's story is a little bit different because this was not something that plagued his entire life, right? So as a child, Kogan says that Gershwin definitely had ADHD and suffered from intense impulses. He was like the most troubled of troublemakers in school. Teachers would absolutely hate him, I'm sure. He would steal food. He fought people, like fist fights and all of those things. He vandalized property and he set fires to things. He also, Richard Cogan mentions in his TED Talk, he also lost his virginity at age 9.
Wow.
Yeah, wildest part to me.
He lost his virginity at age 9. So that, just to emphasize, this kid, he was so troubled and he pretty much followed any impulse that came to his mind, right?
Right.
He was so hyperactive and just would not, like Mr. or Dr. Kogan said, he would be put on Adderall if modern medicine was a part of his lifetime. However, at age, probably around age 10, he was outside one day, outside of school, playing hooky, not being in class, of course. And a window was open, to which he heard a violin playing. And as that violin started playing, he became incredibly transfixed by the music he was hearing. And from that moment on, he dedicated his life to music at a very young age. And then at age 15, after having taken a few piano lessons, he became a very serious composer. At age 20, I believe, is when he was commissioned for his first real composition, and he became a very well-known composer after that. What's interesting about Gershwin is that point to which he became super enthralled with music, his entire life like flipped upside down. All of those hyperactive tendencies that he had just started to whittle away. Um, Again, Dr. Kogan mentions in his TED Talk that like you would never have suspected that Gershwin had ADHD as a child, that he was such a troublemaker as a child, because as an adult, I mean, you might have suspected that he had a little bit more energy than the rest of the people you talk to, but that was it.
He was so focused in music.
He was, and it's interesting to see how music basically changed his life entirely. He still had some sort of hyperactive tendencies. Again, Dr. Kogan mentioned that whenever Gershwin would play songs, they were typically like super fast in tempo. And it was his older brother Ira who had to slow him down and was really more of his control. It was a lovely balance and a lovely companionship between the two brothers. And unfortunately, Gershwin passed away very early at age 38 because of a brain tumor, which he did not get diagnosed for until like the day of his death.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate because obviously Gershwin made some really fantastic music. But all of these composers struggled so much in their life. And we really don't talk about it. We don't recognize it. I mean, mental health has always been such a huge stigma, and it really hasn't been until this century that we've sort of become more open as people to talk about it and be more vulnerable about it. So I really think it's
important. We're still behind in
important.
that area, though.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
I mean, there is a lot of emotion, and it's hard to be vulnerable, which I think is why all of these composers like found some sort of escapism or therapy, or their safe haven was in their music, right?
Which could lead credence to why, what your earlier musings about why we think about composers as hunched over, feverishly writing their music.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? It makes me wonder, like, a lot of these great composers that we know and mostly talk about in generic music history classes are like have faced all of these challenges. Like, it makes me wonder, who would they be without this? I mean, I'm assuming, like, for Schumann, obviously all of the challenges he faced played so deeply into his music. Gershwin, same thing. Like, you know, it's almost, I just wonder if they didn't have to face these challenges, would they even be composers, or would they? I mean, their music probably would have a completely different tone and purpose behind it, right?
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, like what I said about the whole era of love letter music with the Schumanns, with both of them, with Clara and Robert. There was an entire, like, just dozens upon dozens of songs that are so powerful and existed at all because of the challenges they faced with Clara's father.
Yeah, I feel like there needs to be part 2 of us just kind of talking about like underlying meanings to music.
And art through adversity.
Ah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
There's the title of our podcast. Art through adversity.
Well, too late.
And that's the end of that.
Yeah.
Expect part 2, art through adversity. Coming to maybe later. We're not planning on taking this class a second time.
Yeah.
Well,
we're definitely passing.
Right.
Yes, I do hope so. Are there any last thoughts or ideas you guys want to bring up?
Yeah, a little bit. I think, particularly in the realm of composers, I think that group of people throughout history, especially among those who were most challenged by their society, produced some very interesting philosophers. Because these people had to learn how to deal with so many things that they developed just things that tend to be generally really good life advice to deal with stuff. Because they had to deal with so much.
Either they went completely mad for it, or I mean, they've definitely set an example for us to acknowledge and possibly follow. Even in our own struggles with mental health and things.
I'm gonna go burn down a building now.
No?
I'm gonna become a glutton now.
I guess I'll go have a glass of wine. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. You learned something from it. And we had a great time. Well, it doesn't matter. Every day's a learning experience, David.
Yes. You gotta blow your own mind at least once a week.
At least just tell us in the comments below how your mind was entirely entirely by what we're talking about.
Please dislike this video.
Please like and subscribe, comment about what you
dislike and
learned today.
unsubscribe.
Thank you so much for listening. We will see you probably never.
Thank God.
Thank you for listening.
Wait, no.
Bye-bye.
Joke's on YouTube. This is on my student channel.
Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you're unlisting it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.